Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Podcraft. This is the show all about podcasting, helping you to grow a better podcast. I'm Colin Gray from thepodcasthost.com, and I'm joined by Matthew. As always, how are you getting on, Matthew?
Good day, sir. Yeah,
Yes.
again, joining us on the transcontinental podcast recording format. So excited to dive in and talk podcast growth.
Exactly, yeah. So if you listen to the last episode, you'll know that this season we are going through podcast growth, all inspired by the fact that we're launching our very own podcast growth book right at this very minute. So it's a book all about growth. It's tons of tactics, tons of techniques, tons of tips and actionable tasks that you can dip into and do to grow your audience. We talked about it a bit last time round, but you can pop over to thepodcasthost.com/podcast growth book to see the full details and get hold of the book and grow your audience over the coming months. So this season, we're covering a task from each chapter on every episode. And this time around, what is it, Matthew? What have we got for them this week?
Yeah, the chapter is Growing Your Audience by Knowing Your Audience, which sounded great at first, but I am sick writing and saying that now. But I'm sure the listener will love it. This one is about running a listener survey. There's loads of opportunities there for finding out new info for content and also for growing your show as well.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, we're following the structure of the book. Each chapter, each section is one task, which we give you a bit of detail around, and we give the full instructions on how to go about it. So what's the type of this one, Matthew?
This is a big strategy. So, this is something that you want to put a bit of planning behind. It's not the sort of thing that you'll just do on a whim. So you're going to really need about an hour to set up your survey, to do the planning, to think about the questions, to find the tool that you want to use, and then it's going to factor into, planning into your episodes. We talked about calls to action on the last episode, so for your next 3-4 episodes, you'll probably want to put that as your call to action on these episodes. And you're going to need maybe another hour come the time to analyse your survey responses as well. So this is a big strategy, as we've said. And level wise, Colin, is this something somebody would want to do from episode 1 or what?
No, I think, so we've got this down as at least 10 episodes, if not further down the road, at least 10 episodes in, or possibly even just thinking once your workflow is established. So once you're in a groove, once you feel like, you're in a routine of getting your episode out every single week, you're happy with the way you're making it, you've got it down to a T, and now you want to know where to go next. You want to get feedback on what you've got. You're happy with what you've got, but you want to get feedback on it to see how you can improve it.
Yeah, I think you just need to use your own judgment here, because there'd be nothing worse than doing a survey, putting loads of time into it, and then you just weren't quite ready. You didn't quite have the audience engagement yet, and then you get no responses, and it's really unhelpful. It's cost you a lot of time, and you probably feel a bit deflated about it too. So use your sort of initiative here, use your intuition, if that's the word.
Yeah, totally. I love this because this is the absolute opposite really of the CTAs last time around. The type of the calls to action section is a quick thing. Time required can be just a few minutes even, just to think it through and add it into your show, and the levels right from the start. But in the book, we've got plenty of these types as well, which is, that big strategy that does take a much longer amount of time to set up, to run, to deliver, but it pays off so much. Like, this is the kind of thing that can actually make a big, big difference to your audience in the long term. So let's dive into how you do it, Matthew. How do you go about starting to think about conducting a survey?
I guess the first thing that the listener might be wondering is, well, how do I do it in terms of, like, how do I set it up? Where do I set it up? There are a lot of great tools out there these days, aren't there, that you could create your survey on. Its very simple, sort of accessible one, I guess, is like Google Forms, or the typical one is SurveyMonkey as well. So a lot of free options out there. And then you've got some sort of pro options as well, don't you?
Yeah, like Typeform. We use Typeform for just about all of our stuff now. In fact, I've started doing all of our recruitment on Typeform as well. So anyone that applies for a job with us has to fill in a Typeform. Just gonna love it so much. It's just so easy to make. It looks really nice. It's like a really nice user experience to fill in. So it costs a bit of money, but to me, it's worth it because it makes it so much more nice and pleasant for people to fill it in. So yeah, it's quite cool.
Yeah, I dare say you could do this on other tools, but I like the feature where it's like you could send them off in a wee direction based on their answers.
Yeah,
So it's
the
almost like
conditional
it's like a
answers,
fighting fantasy book.
yeah,
We should
yeah,
actually make that. But
yeah,
yeah, so it's like, somebody says no to something, and then you're like, oh, right, well, tell me more about that. And then, they go down
yeah,
this rabbit hole, and so you can really, really hone in. Obviously, again, you be respectful of people's time, as we'll cover. You
yeah,
can't take
yeah,
this too far, but yeah, really, really flexible, good tool.
yeah,
Typeform.
yeah. Yeah. So once you've got that set up, once you've got the tools, once you've got them there, you create your survey. And it depends what tool you use, but I mean, all of them are relatively easy. You choose the question type. You don't make it too long. Advisable to keep it, less than a few minutes to fill out. But you can give people the option to go deep. Like we found with our surveys, haven't we, Matthew, that you give people, you have some people that if you give them 5 questions, they'll do like 2-word answers to each one. And some people will spend an hour writing you an essay in the long answer ones. So if you do a few multiple choice questions, a few option questions that give you some nice, quick, easy data, but give them a few open questions as well. And you will get some big feedback from some people, won't you?
Yeah, time and time again. A couple of years ago, when I researched this for the first time, the advice that you see over and over again on surveys is open up with some easy multiple choice stuff. So you don't want you don't want question 1 to be this big empty text box, because then people are like, I can't be bothered with this. Whereas, they've clicked through a few and they're thinking, this is good, this is easy. And then they get to a text box and they're like, yeah, I'm and it's just a weird psychology thing, I guess. But, all the evidence points towards that being the case. So, open with a couple of low-hanging fruits.
I think just one thing, just to jump in, when you've created it, so once you've got the survey created, maybe it's worth going into a few types of questions, like a few specific questions we found work, isn't it, Matthew? But make sure, one of the things that we always found with our surveys is make sure we talked about calls to action the last time around, using short links. Making it easy to remember. Just make sure you put it on a URL that's really easy to point them to. Because I found with a Typeform, for example, you get a URL from them that's like a bunch of gibberish. It's just letters and numbers. It's impossible to read out. So you need to use something like PrettyLink to pretty that up. And we'll use PrettyLink to make thepodcasthost.com/summer survey or something, and it'll point towards the right place on whether it's Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, Typeform, whatever it is. And that works really well for us, certainly, or it has in the past. What about length, actually, Matthew? Before we get into the types of questions, how long would you leave it open?
Oh, so not the length of time to complete it, but yeah, to leave it open. Yeah, I reckon.
Exactly.
I reckon you want to be mentioning it on at least 3 episodes, I would say, if you want to get the real value from it. So yeah, I would say, again, it depends on people's release schedules and that. It depends on the other ways that they communicate with their audience. Maybe they've got an email list and it's very engaged. So that might mean that they could get a shorter window of time. Sorry, I'm battering my computer there, getting animated about it. But you could maybe get away with just doing a couple of weeks because you're going to get a big bulk answers in. Whereas other folks might say, 2 to 3 months, I'm just going to keep mentioning it and hopefully drip feed in these answers. So the classic it depends, isn't it?
Yeah, I do like the incentive-based survey. Like I think one that can work well, although there's pros and cons to this, is, if you do seasons, you do the season break and you do a month, you take 4 weeks off, season break, you mention the survey on the final episode of the season. So you're only getting one mention in there once, to be fair, but it gives people, that time off, something to engage with, something to do. And maybe you're using social, email list, all that kind of stuff to mention it a fair bit. And you say that the deadline is, the start of the next season, because you're going to use that feedback to actually tie into the next season, to power the next season, to like power the content, to inform how you go about it, all that kind of stuff. So that's one way to give an incentive. But another one being just to give a prize. Like we've done that before, haven't we? Like giving away a mic for in exchange for feedback like that.
Yeah, there's 2 approaches with the prizes, isn't there? Like a prize draw where like a couple of lucky people are going to going to come away with something big and tangible, or there's the option of going like the reward for all route. So pretty much everyone who enters, there might be an opportunity where they could leave their email address and you will automatically set it up so that you send them something. And that's pretty much going to be a digital thing. You know, it might be a wee PDF about something, it might be access to a course, it could be anything, just something that you're not going to have to ship to potentially thousands of people all over the world.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So yeah, if you do use an incentive, I think it can be a nice way to do it. And in that case, you're going to be doing the approach you mentioned, isn't it? Like, which is mentioning it over three, four episodes over a month, I would say. It's a decent deadline. Yeah, I think that can work well. What about some example questions then? What kind of stuff have we asked people over the years on our surveys that's yielded some good information to power our future episodes and our growth from there?
Yeah, it's really worth thinking about. Like, again, you want to make this as succinct as possible so people complete it. So then you're really thinking to yourself, what do I actually want out of this? What data is going to be useful to me? So a lot of people might automatically think, I want to find out ages, I want to find out geographic locations, I want to find out genders. That's fine, but ask yourself, okay, but why? What's the purpose? What am I going to do with this? And you might think, well, actually, I don't really need this info. So yeah, I think first and foremost, Colin, you've just got to think, what's going to be useful here? What am I going to actually go and do with this data?
Yeah. And we found it really, the balance between, multiple choice type questions that you mentioned earlier, like starting with some easy multiple choice stuff is great. Because you can really easily analyze that, and you can put some graphs up on the site. Like one of our best surveys is our gear survey, where we ask people what kind of mics do they use, what kind of mixers do they use, like do they record with headphones on, that kind of stuff. And we try and make that multiple choice as much as possible because it makes it really easy to turn it into graphs that you can, that are interesting to people. Our readers love that data, which is great. And that's something you can use to grow your show. If you can turn your survey into really useful info that attracts more readers, that attracts links, that attracts interest, that can be a great way to use it to grow. But even aside from that whole starting with the multiple choice stuff is quite nice. Like, think about those ones, that data you can really use quite easily. And then the balance is obviously that's kind of restrictive. It doesn't get you super deep. You can't really find out, why do people listen? What do they want more of? That kind of stuff. So that's when you move into the long answers, the letting them be, letting them go for it and just write an essay to you, which is harder to analyze though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just worth mentioning about, like, any time I've ever created a survey and there's been a multiple choice answer and you go over it again and again and you get feedback from people, that's another thing you should do, get a couple of people to go through a survey before you push it out to the whole world. But it's like, no matter how many options, and you don't want like multiple choice with like 40 different options, but you'll always get somebody who gets back to you and they're like, you didn't mention this, what about that? And you're like, so yeah, again, that's the internet for you. But so multiple choice stuff, good to get somebody to kind of go through it and just say, I think you should probably add this or that in, or but yeah, then when you move on to the sort of, getting specific feedback about the show, you could ask them about things like the format and the length. So, you might be saying, I've done a lot of solo shows, but I've also had the odd interview guest. What do you think about that? Do you like the interviews better? Would you rather I did more of them, or do you like it when it's just me? And you could take the feedback on board there and see what they're saying. And a question of length. Do you sometimes I go over an hour? Is that too much? Or, sometimes I'm doing 20 odd minutes. Is that too much, or would you want more? So, yeah, you get feedback on stuff like this. You don't necessarily have to take it on board. You certainly wouldn't take it on board if it's just like one person, has a big diatribe on your show length or something. I wouldn't necessarily change things based on that. But if you see these patterns, again, that's the crux of the whole survey, is if you see these patterns, you could then have a serious think about making some changes.
Yeah, and that powers your growth. Like, if you find that 90% of your audience prefer your short episodes as opposed to your long episodes, then make them all short, and suddenly you'll start growing much faster because people will stick around. They'll listen to every single one. They'll send it to more friends because they'll love it more, that kind of thing.
What about the question of why do they listen? Why might that be important to stick in there?
Yeah, I love that kind of open question. And a couple of related ones too. But why do they listen? I mean, that's where you get the meaningful data on, what's working for them. What benefit do they get from this show? What's in it for them? Like what are they looking to get from this show? And what do they actually get from it? Because that's what really powers those repeat listens. That's what powers those people turning into real fans of the show, which then helps them promote you to other people. So if you can find out really, what elements of your show is really growing that loyalty, really developing that love for your content, and then double down on that stuff. That is absolute gold. And it relates to other types of questions, like really asking more deep questions, like, what are you struggling with? What are you struggling with just now? And obviously, you want to try and narrow that down to something related to your topic, as opposed to just being a general counselor. But we often just ask the question, what are you struggling with in podcasting? What's your biggest barrier in podcasting right now? And that gets us some of the best information that really powers our content. Like, we get some of the best ideas for content based on a question like that. Quite simple question, but really it gets to the root of what problems your listeners have that they want solved. This is, again, why do they listen? They're listening to almost certainly to solve a problem, okay? To solve a problem in their life, to get over a barrier, or even if it's a problem like, I have a smaller audience than I would like. I want a bigger audience. I want to know how to grow my audience. Even if it's a problem like that, really finding out what's holding them back can make a huge difference.
Yeah, so
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's awkward when you ask what they're struggling with, and somebody's like really bad hemorrhoids, and you're like, but this is a video game show.
Indeed. Not so much of that. Do we ask then what people don't like? Is it worth getting that feedback?
I think so. I think you can open yourself up to that. What do you not like about the show? Again, you don't need to take action on it. And, you probably will get a few bits and pieces of feedback that you think that's a bit harsh, and it only comes up once. So I think you could discount that. But yeah, there's no harm in doing that. Again, if you get a massive pattern of stuff, it's like the 10-minute intro that you do really annoys me, and like hundreds of people are saying that, then you might want to change that. Yeah. So that's the thing. This is going to be a bit uncomfortable doing a survey, but the benefits outweigh the negatives, I think, definitely.
Indeed. Absolutely. Last one I'll mention is, this is one you suggested, Matthew, so I'm stealing one of your good ideas here. It's how did they discover the show? Like, find out how people find you. Because that discovery aspect is one of the hardest to solve, like where people are finding your show, where people are searching for your topic. Ask more of that stuff, because if you find, you will find some unexpected sources there that you should go and double down on, that you should go and do more of. Find more of the same. If you get 20 people saying, "Oh, I found you in this community because a friend, a big member of this community mentioned your show," and there was 1,000 people in that community that all now listen to your show. You go, "Well, right, so that's a good source. I'm going to go and find some more communities." That stuff can be really useful as well. So
and on the flip side, like if you've just spent like $4,000 on Spotify advertising and literally nobody discovered you that way, then you could probably save that money for better use going forward, can't you?
Exactly. All right. Well, what's the further reading for this section?
Yeah, thepodcasthost.com/how to survey, all one word. And that's a very good article on growing your podcast with an audience survey. And what about the old link to the book as well, Colin?
Indeed. If you want to check out the book, of which this is just one section, of course, there's about 100 of these for you in this very book. Go over to thepodcasthost.com/podcast growth book. That's thepodcasthost.com/podcast growth book. You'll find all the details there and how to get hold of it. We'd really appreciate you checking it out. It's only the price of it. It's kind of a mental promoting something like this, isn't it? Because like generally courses, coaching, production, all that kind of stuff, it's hundreds, if not thousands of pounds, isn't it? But books are just like ridiculously cheap in general, aren't they? Like under a tenner for this.
Yeah, no, it is funny. It's funny, the book price market. Although I do hear, like, I've heard a few times people saying that the price of books in Australia is like totally, they're really expensive. More, I think it was Joe Abercrombie was listening to an interview with him. He said Australian book prices are just like off the charts.
It's true, but that is relative to normal books. So I mean, you're going from a £5 to £15. It's still a bargain, really.
I mean, you get like, you could get the top expert in the world on something to write a book and pick up for a tenner, and like it's their best, that's their A game, as they say.
Totally, like 10 hours worth of training that you read through, and then you go and buy an online course which is like 30 minutes of videos for £300 or something like that. It's just it's weird.
Or if you're really bad, you get the Audible refund.
Yeah,
never exactly. That, obviously, but I know a friend of mine has done that before.
Yes, only a friend, and he did it dozens of times. Anyway,
I'm going to have loads of like audiobook narrators and that on at me. For the record, I've never done that.
Okay, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found this useful out there. I hope you got something from this, that you're going to go away and do a survey now. And we've got another 11 of these. We've got 13 in total on season 13 of Podcraft. So please do join us again next week, where we're going to take another section of the book and take you through one more growth tactic. Hopefully get you growing your audience without even having to buy the book. Thanks again, Matthew. Good fun.
Thank you.
And everyone out there, have fun over the next week. We shall see you next time. Talk to you then.